Hi, Amy. I'm so glad to have you here today. And
Yes,
we've been meaning to do this for a while.
I know. I'm excited that we're finally sitting down to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So, every time I go to do this, I'm always like, damn, I should have looked before. But some background for people listening. We worked together one-to-one in the Embodied Method, and you finished like a year ago almost, a little
I
less.
no, I think I finished it was like right around June when my kids were getting out of school because then I worked with you sort of continuation just in the messenger and practice better and stuff for like the duration of the summer. And then I think it was like right around September when
That's right.
that sort of wrapped up.
Okay, so we finished the main Embodied Method like right before June
Yeah.
2023.
3. And it's now, yeah, Feb 2024.
2024.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's, helpful background for someone listening or watching. So to kind of start us off, if you can just share as much as you're comfortable getting into what your relationship with food and body was like before doing this work.
Yeah, I'm giggling because I don't know why. I don't know why I'm just giggling, but I think I'm just excited to see you.
I'm excited to see
Um,
you too.
but the so I remember one of our like early conversations when I was considering like working with you, and I just remember saying, and this is always the thing that comes to mind, is like there was just something that just felt like deeply fucked up about my relationship with food and body. Um, I never like growing up, I it was hard almost to think of like those memories of like first time when body felt odd or whatever. Like I felt like I was maybe in a pretty protective space growing up. There wasn't, I don't feel like a lot of diet conversation per se. I don't really remember my mom dieting or my dad or anything like that. I was like ridiculously active. I swam 6 days a week for like hours a day. So I kind of ate what I wanted because I was so active. My body size, I was in a smaller sized sort of body. And then as I got older and like subsequent college, um, and I gained for me like I started gaining weight and that was sort of the entryway for me into sort of diet world. And I found that I wanted all my friends were in relationships and I wasn't and this and like I just had like messed up body image stuff way back earlier on, like before I feel like I had anything disordered with food. I just felt like a lack of maybe self-love, self-care, like body image stuff. And so when eventually it was like, I can remember I had graduated college and it was like, okay, all my friends are in serious relationships. I want to be in one. I'm heavier than I've ever been because I'm no longer swimming 6 days a week. And at that point, I was drinking very heavily. And I just, it was like oh, okay, well, let's go on a diet. Let's join Weight Watchers. And my mom actually joined with me, I think, as like my moral support sort of thing. Not that she was ever the person who was like growing up talking about dieting or whatever, but like she was just thinking, to join with me. And I feel like that was sort of like I'm thinking of your like toothpaste. Can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. That was like the real like taking the toothpaste lid off on like really being in diet culture. And so or like consciously. I mean, it's all around us, but like
Right.
like very consciously being around it. And then ever since, so I was probably like 22, 3-ish, and I'm 40 now. I don't care to share, it doesn't matter to me to share that. And then ever since then, so basically the 18 years since then, it was always one thing or another. In looking back, once we dug in and done this work, like I had developed super disordered relationship with exercise, sort of obsessively exercising. I would gain, I would lose, I would lose, I would gain, I would gain, I would lose. And it was just constant over time after having my kiddos. My kids are my youngest just turned 6, my oldest is about to turn 8. After having kiddos, I developed some chronic health issues, and I was the largest I had ever been. And all the while, again, when you're like starting your life and your relationship with doctors in a smaller size body, and your body size progressively gets larger, guess what gets louder at the doctor's office? Comments about your weight, comments about your health. You have one lab that's a little bit off, and it's like, forget it. Like the shaming around my size. I could still remember, and I actually like really liked one of these docs, like making a comment when I went in for a visit. You know, this was like my OB, and like going in for my annual OB visit, and she was commenting about how I had put on weight since delivering the kids and like all these things. So it's just like the amount of crap over the years. So then because of these health issues, I'm someone who I deal with a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of, mental health things that sort of go along with my story and in the background, but I like at that point, I wasn't even necessarily thinking I was interested in dieting, even though I didn't like love my body. I was appreciative of it. It birthed two great kids. But like I really started developing like a lot of anxiety around my health. I had some pretty traumatic years on a health front. I was hospitalized for a little while, like very, very sick. And to me, I always just equated food and health and size, and my size is big and I'm having health issues, therefore my size is the reason why, it's my fault, a lot of stuff like just all sort of messed up. And so right before we started working together, I had actually found out that I was pre-diabetic. I like again, shame and guilt. It's all my fault. Yada yada. Even though diabetes is all over my genetic family tree, but it was 100% my fault, and it was 100% because of my size, and it was 100% because of everything that I was doing. This is the story that I'm telling myself, and so I did a program with a registered dietitian who was very focused on helping me improve my blood sugars. And it was a 4-month program. And it was the first time in my life that I really wasn't focused on my weight. I was truly just in my mind focused on my health, this health outcome of like lowering my A1C, which I did in the time that we worked together. And the second we finished, it was like no sooner did I finish than all of a sudden, like, so while I was doing that work, like I was exercising, I was eating, good in quotes, doing all these things. And like the second I finished, it was like out of control, binge central again, which was like back how I would have been in diet days of do a diet and then come off and go crazy, do a diet, come off and lose control. Even though I wasn't focused on my weight, I really wasn't looking on the scale. And actually, I remember thinking at the time, this is pretty cool because the scale didn't move, but I really lowered my A1C, and I was no longer considered pre-diabetic, and I was really proud of that. And also, I could see that immediately. It was like, okay, I got my good lab. I'm not pre-diabetic anymore. Let's go back to being out of control. And it felt just like coming off a diet. And I remember thinking, man, something's really fucked up in this, as I was saying before. And that's when I had reached out to you. And I had known each other for a little while, anyways. And I had, admired and followed your work and whatnot. And I just said, there is something deeper that's going on here that has to do with this relationship with food, with body, with my relationship with health, with my anxiety around all of that stuff. That just doesn't seem right because I truly wasn't focused on weight for once, and yet it was like the exact same thing of having just come off of Weight Watchers, or I had a doc put me on Whole30 at one point, all these different things. And it was just no different. And that was really the indicator and the wake up call to me that it was like, okay, something is just not right. This cannot be it. This can't be it. And so, yeah, so then we reached out, you and I talked for a while, had a million questions, and then eventually we got started. That's my long
Yeah.
backstory.
Thank you for sharing that whole backstory because I think it really helps show how it's not just like it's not so always so linear. Like you had this
No.
experience where you were not focusing on health, on sorry, where you were not focusing on weight for once, and some people might hear that and think, oh, that's like that's the end of the story. But I remember you sharing this piece of like something was like you in your words, something was really fucked up because it wasn't enough to just be
Yeah.
focused on health and not weight, and it was
Yeah.
still driving
Yeah.
these binging behaviors.
Hmm.
So in your story, I think the part where you were grappling with like all of the questions and the what ifs and is this really right for me? What's going to happen to my health as someone who
Hmm.
has a traumatic health history and was really concerned about that. Can you talk through a little bit about how you went from, all the questions about intuitive eating, is this right? Oh no, what's this going to do to me? To taking that leap and signing
Yeah,
up to do a program to heal your relationship with food.
totally. I I mean, so I am like a very faith-filled sort of person. We talked a lot about this during my journey. I would have these sort of coincidences, what I would like to call God winks, these sort of God wink moments. So I remember talking with you and I remember being terrified, right? Because like during I didn't get into detail when I was talking about the diet, but like I had all the like sneak eating, hiding, eating to the point of making myself sick, in addition to the weight up and down, all the things. And I remember thinking, okay, um, I just feel like this can't be it. Like this can't be the best that it could be. Even when I remember thinking, like, I can look back at pictures of myself with my husband on vacation when we first started dating, and like my body was so small. Not that that's good or bad, it's just objectively what it was. And like I can remember hating it then. I can remember being self-conscious of it then. And like I remember thinking and having these thoughts. So I was debating about continuing work in sort of a one-to-one capacity with that other dietitian because I had had success with that dietitian. I got my A1C down. And I love that dietitian, by the way. Like I just that individual was so supportive to me. And I truly think some of the mindset work we had started to do in that other program, even though my experience was my experience, like it, I think paved the way for an easy transition into intuitive eating. But I can remember sort of talking with you and talking with her, and not that I was like trying to compare and like pit the two of you against one another, but like I was trying to understand like hear and listen to your own experiences and reactions to my health story, because there were all these spheres around like if I just allow myself to eat all foods, like I'm really gonna pack on the pounds. Like I'm already larger than what I've ever been. My doctors already hammer me about my BMI or whatever. And already the slightest ding of, a cholesterol lab being off and forget it. Like I just get hammered by my docs because I'm in a larger body. And so I remember thinking if I truly allow all foods, like my weight isn't going to go out of control, which meant my health was going to go out of control because to me, weight equaled health. And my health was already so fragile. And so I was really, really scared about that. And I was just really afraid. And I remember at some point, sort of like, I do a lot of journaling. I did some journaling and like put like, okay, what are the pros and cons of working with Leah, so to speak, and what are the pros and cons of doing work with this other individual? And I could see it became, putting it down on paper, there was like this really stark and obvious distinction. Like all of my there was like one side of the paper that was like the intuitive eating world that was all like based on hope and love, and I want to love myself, I want to love my body, I want to have this like hopeful relationship, I want to build trust with myself, I want to believe that I can do it, like all this sort of positive sort of things. And on the other side was all this like fear-based, anxiety-based driven things. And I just remember thinking to myself, and I remember getting God winks at the time, and I wish I have them all written down and someday they'll be in a book. But like
Mm.
there were all these like really beautiful divine timing spiritual moments of just affirmation that it was the time for me to I had gone my whole life making choices based on fear. I was never going to find my partner because of my body, therefore let's start that first diet. Or I was going to have this problem because of that, so therefore let me do this other diet. And it just sort of felt like everything that I had done hadn't worked, coming from this kind of fear-based place. And I wanted to try, even though it was still terrifying, to make decisions like grounded in more of a faith-based place, a hope, a love-based place. And so that's what it was. It wasn't like this like instantaneous thing. It was just this, because you were very gracious with your time and answering questions and, being patient as I sort of worked through it and went through my process. But then yeah, that journaling moment, and I remember some of the winks that came around that time. It just became super obvious, and I just kind of wanted that different energy. I didn't want that anxious driven energy to make the decision anymore.
I love this piece of your story because it really is sort of like almost an irony of to do this work of intuitive eating. Often there's like a hit of intuition that tells you this is it right now. This is the next thing.
Hmm.
So it almost like takes a bit of its own medicine in the beginning.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I love how the decision-making process for you was so like spiritually based. I
Hmm.
also think it's important to bring up you are someone who was like really appreciates the facts, like seeker, question asker, and you did
Yes,
take time to look over some research as part of, you had the spiritual
totally.
part side by side with the research, the facts, which is like
Yeah.
so my favorite kind of person to work with because that's me.
Hmm.
Like I love all of the God winky, like universal kind of type stuff. And also I'm like, show me the facts. Like I like that
Yeah,
balance.
it's so funny to me because I remember at the time that being such a big deal for me. And like it's funny to like not funny, that's probably not the right word. I don't know what the right word is. But like I think about again, I remember at the time you were saying like okay, you had never really shared that like research doc with someone I think that early on because I
I
remember
had,
you
yeah.
making a comment and you're like, would that be helpful? And I'm like, oh my gosh, if you'd be willing to share it. Yes. And now I think you gift it to the
It's a
world as
freebie.
like a
Yeah,
free resource. Yeah,
exactly.
which is so cool. But it's just funny because at the time it was all like, I remember being like so stuck in some of that research stuff and like, well, wait a minute, but what if? Well, okay, yeah, it might not be have to do with my weight, but what if it does? But what if it did help? I can remember doing all of that sort of with you and yeah, looking at that stuff side by side and it was helpful to see because again, like even though it took a long time to like fully like let it go, um, I could start to see, well, like the the opposite. Like if you were saying that like I don't know, I'm not articulating my thoughts well right now. Like I just remember thinking at one point that well clearly my lived experience has proven to me
Yes.
that this route of dieting and every successive diet I've gotten bigger in all the different things. Like clearly, even though I'm trying to poke holes through the intuitive eating research, or I was saying, I wish they had research on this, they don't have enough research on that, or whatever. Like there was still this entire body of anti-diet research that aligned with my lived experience that I was eventually able to see, which I think helped. And then when you took it in conjunction with like some of the other more spiritual kind of stuff that I was sort of going through, it all kind of came together at the exact right time,
Yeah.
I suppose.
You bring up such a good point, Amy. Like you can look at the research all day long, but for most, if not all of my clients, they really they don't even need to. They can just say, well, what has the last, year, 2 years, 5 years, decade,
Mhm.
2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades of my life been like and felt like
Mhm.
living in diet mentality. And I
Yeah.
have this professor from undergrad who says something that I love. She's a PhD. She's done so much nutrition research. She's an episode on the podcast, and I can link in the show notes. But she says research is just one way of knowing,
Uh-huh.
and I love that so
Hmm.
much because I think we often like devalue our own lived experience. Like there's so
Yeah.
many other ways of knowing. So
Hmm.
to to kind of start getting into like the after part of your story. So you go through, you take your time with really deciding to do this work and asking all the big questions, looking into the research, reflecting on your own lived experiences, journaling, pros and cons list, all the things. So what is your relationship with food and body like now after doing this work, which I know is such a huge question?
I know. It's like such a loaded question. And it's funny. I actually think it's kind of interesting. And in a way, I'm glad that uh life was life for a while, which is why this call got so delayed and why it's 8 months after or whatever we worked together that we're having this conversation. There was a part of me that, wished we had heard earlier. And yet at the same time, I'm very grateful because like it's almost like you really see the fruits of the labor, so to speak. Um, I have had the most wild personal life journey since like weeks after we um weeks after we finished, like just unbelievable family challenges, navigating stressful holiday time, um, health issue, some just like the never ending bugs and viruses and gunk at home when you have kids who are in schools, to we had a tragic passing in the family, to a couple weeks ago, I hit my head and got a concussion. So like it's been like, and that, we're not going to go into all the, but like it's been a really traumatic period of time. And I cannot imagine going through this season of life without having done this work. Like, I remember when we were first getting started, we realized, I realized, like my sleep had been terrible. I was exhausted all the time and whatnot. I was waking up in the middle of the night almost every single solitary night. And I always just thought it was an anxiety driven thing or whatever. Come to realize, as I start learning how to listen to my own body and understand it, I was hungry. I was waking up in the middle of the night hungry. I remember saying to you, like, holy shit, Leah, I think I've been not intentionally, because in my mind I hadn't been on a diet. I
Right.
was just trying to be good and be healthy because I was in a larger body and had all these health issues. And yet I think I was just chronically under fueling and under eating, and to the point where like I didn't even recognize what hungry was. Like hungry to me was like ravenous, loud growling, like can barely function, like that starving. That anything until that, like it just didn't even register to me that my body needed fuel. And so like I was literally waking up in the middle of the night hungry because I wasn't eating enough. I wasn't properly fueling my body. And so I can remember I remember somewhere early on in the process sort of understanding like, oh my gosh, I'm not properly eating. And so to think of like now, ironically, like the past, ever since I started to like heal from my concussion, I just had this itch to like just get active again because I really wasn't doing anything for a long period of time. I was just kind of resting. And so I've been exercising and whatnot. And all of a sudden, the past couple nights, I had noticed like, I'm waking up in the middle of the night again. And I remember saying to myself, I must not be eating enough again because now that I'm burning more fuel, now that I'm exercising more. And I was like, okay, note to self, like, got to
Yeah.
start making sure I have a little something before I go to bed so I can stop waking up because I don't like sleeping this way. I can't imagine going through this season of life and still thinking about food and
Yeah.
still stressing about food. I can't imagine, like, I used to get so irritable, and for so long, it was like, oh, it's just my anxiety history. Oh, it's just my PTSD history. Oh, it's just this. No, I was hungry. Like, well, and it was some of that too.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the time, I was just hungry. Like, I hadn't eaten properly. I was like, there was just so much that was like, I just felt so disconnected from understanding I think as every subsequent doctor and diet and set of rules and all things got piled on top, I just became so disconnected from recognizing what I needed, recognizing what my body needed. And it just, I can't even imagine. So, I mean, right now, I would say not that I don't think about food, but like it truly does. You've said it a million times, like how it vacates space in your brain to think about other things. Like I just find myself not really thinking about it all that much anymore. Like short of the okay, it's time to plan a meal for the family. Like what is it that we feel like eating, or it's time to go grocery shopping. What would
Right.
be nice to have in the house, kind of thing. There's no like it doesn't get stressful. I don't find I rarely feel like I have a binge out of control moment. If I do, eat past the point of feeling comfortable where I'm like, oh man, I wish I didn't eat all that much, I can find myself saying, well, you know what? I can see how it happened. I hadn't eaten in a while and I was maybe kind of hungry. Okay, cool. Moving on. My body's on my team. You used to say that to me all the time. That was actually, I want to talk about that really quickly because I thought this was cool. So, um, having again been in such a place where I had such a sense of almost like loathing and just really not in a good place with my body. I remember reading in the intuitive eating book like the reasons why people eat. Maybe it was in the emotional eating section because I would have definitely identified as an emotional eater. And it talked about like one of the reasons people would sometimes turn to food is to again fill comforts and needs. And there's nothing wrong with, emotional eating per se, but like maybe there's like it was almost like a faith-based hunger, like an emptiness sort of a thing, like needing
To
again
fill a
this sort of
void.
like filling the void kind of thing. And I remember you would always say like your body's on your team, your body's on your team, your body's on your team. Like yeah, of course you're going to binge because you just hadn't eaten, and so your body's looking for quick calories and all the things that we like learned over time. And I remember last spring taking my kids to the zoo,
Mm,
and you would always say your body's on your team, your body's on your team, your body's on your team. And we were at the zoo and we were learning about like in every section. It was like the giraffe's neck is long and it's got this like extra thing like at the top of its neck so that when it bends over from so tall to drink its water, it doesn't get dizzy and fall over. And then this animal has this. And all this, I remember sitting there and being like awestruck and saying, and I'm thinking about like to be spiritual is to be amazed, your quote that you love there. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, the giraffe's body is on its team. Like, look at that. And again, I'm a faith-filled kind of person. So I'm like, look at how like God beautifully created these animals to have these really cool creature powers so that they don't tip over when they're drinking their water or when they don't do that. Or, whatever the other animals were. I just the giraffe sticks out to me. And I remember thinking to myself, huh, my body's on my team too. And it's exactly as it should be. And it is something that changed. And that's okay. And that like moment again was like this, like it really like crystallized so much. And I saw myself as like this like extension of like creation almost. And I just remember from then on like things getting a lot easier and like really just looking at, all right, I'm trying to fuel from a place of self-care. I have a lot going on right now. I don't want to be yelling. And right around the same time, I think I remember saying to you, huh, I had this realization the other day. If I'm being so mean to myself all the time because of my food and body choices, that can't be good for my health. I'm sitting here saying I'm so worried about my health, yet I'm like living with a bully all the time. Like
mm,
that can't be good and causing me things. I'm so worried about what I'm eating. Like, and so now again, I feel like I'm all over the place. I'm so long-winded, but like now, like that, it's just kind of gone. Like, it's not to say that there's like zero, it's not, and I don't mean to say there's like zero moments where I look in a mirror and I'm like, oh man, I wish my ex looked different. Or meaning my XYZ, not like my
not your
ex
ex
so and so.
man's.
Um, but like, and it's not like I never see a photo of myself or whatever. It's not like there's never an incident where that's not real. But like the compassion has just totally turned around. Like I feel like it's stuff that you can't even quantify on the outside. It's like inside, the way that it feels, the way I
Yes.
move through the world just feels so different. I'll get together with family members and family members that we went on a vacation before who might I remember, make a comment or say something about food or different things. And I can remember being so upset about them talking about, even though they weren't talking about me and they were saying things like, oh, I think it was you're only as good as skinny feels or something like that. And I can remember being so upset by that. And now I'm like, oh man, I'm so sad for you that you're stuck in that world. I remember right around this time thinking to myself, like, I've just got way more important things to do. I want to make a difference. I want to do things with my kids, all the things. And so it just, okay, I'm going to fuel myself from a place of self care and I'm going to take care of myself because I love myself as I love all other creation. And like, it just started to, I don't know, the stuff just started to go away. And like, I just don't know it just doesn't feel like it's a part of my life anymore. Um, it just doesn't feel like it's a part of my life anymore. And I'm grateful for that because again, like with all that has gone on and on like a personal family front and all that is continued to be in store for me this year, I cannot imagine navigating all of this with still having a disordered relationship with food, with not eating properly, with being constantly woken up at night because I'm hungry, but I don't even realize I'm hungry, with being so irritable that I would like snap at anything, at my kids, at my husband, at whatever, like with my stress levels being through the roof, like moving to the point of like, again, it just didn't feel like, I think, again, I would not move ever. And then I would obsessively move and I would constantly get injured. So, like, all of these just different things. I can't even imagine dealing with that right now. I can't imagine being saddled with guilt on the days when, we had just had a loss in the family and I'm saying, I'm not cooking. I just don't feel like it. It's quicker and easier for me to go get takeout right now and I need to eat something.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine, I cannot imagine going through this season of life and not having done this work. I truly can't.
Yeah. I think about how there's so much stress in life that is beyond our control, like, you know, sudden loss in the family or illness or injury or, natural disaster, endless terrible things happening in the world. But
Yeah.
our relationship with food is something that is within our reach and our relationship with our
Yeah.
bodies. So it's something that we can do and work on. And I don't want to say like it's just that simple, like just, heal your relationship with food. Obviously, this took months and a lot of deep, difficult work for you and for
Yeah.
for most of the clients I work with, that's the story. But now being in this place where you have freed up bandwidth to focus on the things that are beyond your control and to give to the things that are beyond your control, um, and not like have this stress, anxiety, guilt, shame of food and body in
Yeah.
the background.
Yeah. And I don't know what it was in your thing that you were just saying. Something that feels important for me to acknowledge too, right? Is like it almost feels hard to like, because it so much of it feels like an inside thing of how I navigate through the world. It sometimes feels a little bit hard to explain, but I also feel called to sort of share. Like, I think for me, several things kind of collided around the same time, right? Like, I very much I try to live a values driven life. I had done a lot of kind of anti-racism, social justice related work for a while. And so it was easy for me to see quickly, once I became more aware of how much diet culture was in my life, it became easier for me to say, "Ooh, I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to participate in the hierarchy of bodies." So that became a bit easier. I had already been in therapy. I have a pretty complex, set of mental health diagnoses. Um, I had been in therapy for a while with a fantastic therapist. And I, in the course of our work together, started finally, I say finally because I'm someone who I'm coming up on 9 years sober. I used to drink to in excess. And I was afraid for a very long time to use medication support for some of my mental health issues because of my drinking history. But again, that sort of finally healed, and I introduced that, which I think lent itself to all. So I had all these things. I kind of had like my anti-racism journey, my personal mental health journey, and I would say like my faith-based journey, and like reconnecting with my faith in a way that felt true and authentic. And like I would sort of say like I had been kind of deconstructing sort of my formal, I don't know, religious upbringing, and reconnecting with that in a bit. So it all kind of hit at the
Yeah.
same time for me, which, not that I don't try to say that to insinuate that there's like some perfect time. It just kind of worked out that way. But I say all that to also say like it was still really, 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 really hard. I remember talking with you in the beginning, and it was really, really, really hard. It was really hard work to like break up with that, even though I could see it and I could get it, like to, like you said, to fully embody it and like really take it in and let it seep in, to really see just how harmful the lack of self-compassionate thoughts were. um it was just really, really hard. And then yeah, it just kind of turned, it just kind of all turned over.
Yeah.
And I to me they'll forever be connected, just this feel, this like this connection between like my inner knowing, my spiritual knowing, my connection with my body. Like to me, it's all become just like one and the same. I don't know
Mhm.
if
Yeah,
that makes sense, but
it does. And I love that. I love taking it to that place because it starts out, it's like intuitive eating is just an entry point to so many bigger truths and he's just like bigger themes. And I know for you being someone who's so values driven, social justice driven, the when we were getting to the parts and the layers, really, it's more layers than parts of this work that's uncovering diet culture's roots or fat phobia roots in racism and
yeah,
the elitist parts of diet culture, wellness culture. I know that for you that also kind of added to the momentum of
yeah,
almost like the anger and the charge of wanting to
yeah,
leave diet culture because it's
yeah.
more than just negatively impacting us on a personal level, but on a systemic level as well.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. And like I mean, I would see the impacts at home, both in terms of like how my being stuck in what clearly wasn't working, like how much it had negatively impacted my family. Like with me, and look, I have developed all the grace and compassion in the world. Like momming is hard, and it's okay for moms to lose their patience with their kids, and that's a thing that happens, and what have you. And still, like I just remember saying so many times like this can't be as good as it can get. And I do a lot of self-care work. I do a lot of mindfulness work. I do a lot of prayer. And like just something for the longest time, I do a lot of soul searching. None of it was clicking. And again, I think that the combination of my therapy journey, my medication journey, the intuitive eating, and really learning how to fuel my body and take care of my body from a place of self care and self love and not from a place of punishment or trying to control my size, like, has just made all the difference. Like, right now, I'm more active than I've been in. Since I was a high school swimmer, I am more active now than what I've ever been. But not because I'm like sitting here, oh, I've got to try to lose weight or I've got to try. Like I go out for walks in my neighborhood and I'm like, wow, listen to the birds. It's so sunny. The sky looks so blue right now. Or like taking walks, daily walks with my husband. And I'm like, this is such a nice time for us to connect this way.
Yes.
Or like I'll do, like my daughter will talk about in school, they did a brain break and they did yoga. All right, let's do some yoga together. Like I feel like I find myself being like more active than ever. And it's nothing to do with what size pants I'm in or
Yes.
what's on the scale. Like we've had so many beautiful home-based conversations around bodies are different sizes and bodies change and all sorts of different stuff. Like it's just unlocked
Mm,
just a lot at home. And it's changed so much. And again, not that everything's perfect, not that's not real, but like it truly does feel so much more in alignment with the type of life I'm trying to create for myself and our family.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I truly again you will have to catch up off this one offline. Like knowing all the things, like I just can't even imagine. I just can't even imagine. And the other thing you talk about is like helping you make like more like once you start flexing that intuitive muscle, like I've made more aligned business decisions. Like I've chosen to get off social media because it in almost entirely because it just didn't align with health. I've decided to redefine health on my own terms, which feels so good and so aligned. Like there's so many decisions that have happened, and it's so much easier now when I'm like confronting a life decision to like trust the inner voice, to trust the
Yes.
inner knowing, to trust the God winks, like all the things. Like it just yeah, it's been really interesting and fascinating to sort of watch
Mm.
some of that stuff play out too.
Yeah, once you start to eat intuitively, you really do inevitably start to live intuitively because of that toothpaste metaphor, right?
Yeah.
You can't, once the toothpaste is out of the tube in the sense of like, once you've like reawoken your intuition, reconnected with it, you can't be like, oh, I'll just use you for food, but like I won't use you for
Right,
anything else. Something else I
right.
wanted to speak to, Amy, that you said of like the thing about going outside and going on a walk and being like, whoa, look at the sky and the birds, whatever. I really feel like this work opens up room for awe. And
Yeah.
I think about how when we are in diet mindset, when we're so obsessed with food in our bodies, it's a very self-centered experience of the world. And it's not like your fault. It's not like,
Mhm.
oh, you're a self-centered piece of shit, but it's like you can't help but think about how do I look? What am I eating? What am I doing? And for most of the people, for all the people I work with, like that's not how they want to be in the world. They don't want to be in this
Mhm.
self-centered, like only think about me, but it's like beyond their control because the diet mentality
Mhm.
takes over. And so I think that that example really speaks to how when you do this work, you kind of like literally are able to open up your eyes to the world when you've been like
Yeah.
living so inward prior.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I yeah, I just like I've had like this really interesting, I notice it a lot with like nature and with animals especially. Not that that's the only way,
Mhm.
but for me like it's just been yeah, like I noticed like the colors are bright. Like I don't know, it sounds so I hear myself say some of these things. It must seem so ridiculous. It's just it's truly it's also like it's a practice in mindfulness is what it is in many ways. Or at least for me. And like I I because I'm not so in my head thinking about whatever it is, I'm able to stop and notice.
Yeah,
Like I hear the birds. I notice the smell. Like I just notice the things,
right.
and I just feel like, yeah, I notice the interconnection between the like. I just notice so much more because I'm not necessarily thinking about like fiddling with my pants or do these fit right or is my top pulled down over my bottom like
Yeah.
and covering it with my hoodie the right way or my this is my that how does my hair I just it's just kind of not that there's anything wrong. Like I'm trying not to like
Yeah.
say that in like a judgy way for people who go through life that way. It just for me, it just didn't serve, and I felt like this wasn't as good as it could get, and I just felt like there was more out there for me and for my family and for my
Yeah.
life, and this has definitely helped unlock that.
I don't think it's judgy at all. I think it's inspiring to help someone who is in that mindset right now see that it's beyond, it's beyond, what am I trying to say? The impacts go beyond just feeling like shit about yourself. It also means like missing out on the world around you, the people around you, the
Mhm.
opportunities, the nature, the interconnectedness, like the spiritual realm of it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think
Like
it's judgy at all.
there's these two things. I remember we would have talked about them at the time. One, right? So would have been right around the time that I was making the connection with the giraffe because that was I remember that was April vacation. My cousin got married. And I remember being nervous a little bit about going to the wedding. Miguel is my husband. He couldn't come because we needed someone to watch the kids. So, like basically all my babysitters were at the wedding. But so it ended up being like a beautiful weekend with just me and my parents and my two sisters, and we all stayed in a big hotel room, like two adjoining rooms together, and it was, a great weekend. And I remember being so like kind of nervous because it was like my first event that I had kind of been to in a while, and like I was going through this like wild transformation, and I remember being nervous about like what people were gonna say or different things. I just remember being nervous. And I look back on that event and I had so much fun. I danced for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I can remember being like, oh man, like old me would have been like, oh, this dress, I don't know that you look that great. Meh. Like your body, I can remember saying like I can remember thinking to myself, like old me would have said, like, who's that large girl out there on the dance floor thinking she can dance like that? And like I was so and that was I think one of the hardest things too in the beginning, like just recognizing just how much internalized fat phobia I had. Like it
Mhm.
really makes you feel crummy to realize how much when you realize how much you judge yourself for being in a large body, you realize that you're inevitably judging so many others, and
Yes.
it sucks. It really feels awful, and and I remember being kind of like nervous, but it was almost like this just like celebration because I remember eating, but like enjoying, but not overstuffing myself and taking advantage. I was a big take advantage of the moment. If it was a birthday, we're going to pound all the cake. We're going to, at a wedding, we're going to go out of control on purpose, the planned binge thing. And I just remember it was like such a celebration. I danced all night. I had so much fun. I couldn't walk for like days because I had danced so much. But it was like, it was just this most freeing, liberating thing to not be like, whatever, I'm just
Yeah.
dancing and I'm just having fun and no one's caring. And then later in after we had finished in August, my husband and I we went away. We went on he's from the Dominican Republic. We made a trip down to the Dominican Republic. This was our first trip without the kids. And again, they're going to be 6 and 8 because COVID happened and all the things. But like it was we were celebrating our 10-year wedding anniversary and me turning 40. And I can remember talking about it in the early part of the spring when I was doing this work. I remember talking about it in therapy, and I remember saying I was nervous to go to a beach because I haven't been on a beach vacation and this large of a body and the whole bit. And I can remember being nervous and I don't know if we should go. And then all of a sudden again this work shifted and like my perspective on all the things started to evolve. And I can remember saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to go on a vacation with my husband because I'm afraid of what someone else on the beach is going to think of me in my bathing suit. Like, what? Like, no, like life's too short. I don't want to, no, that's not happening. And so then we go and we had again like this most magical trip. Like I got to hold a monkey. I held macaws. Like we got our photos. It was like the most beautiful, amazing, unbelievable trip. And I look and I see myself. And again, I'm in a much larger body than when I was last in the DR. And I just see myself and I am glowing and I am happy. I have pictures of myself like head to toe in a bathing suit, standing there with a parrot. And I can remember again pictures of myself, like I said, in my two piece where I'm way smaller and being like, oh God, no. And like,
Mm,
I look at this and I'm like, look at you. You just look so happy. And like, so it's that, like,
mm,
that you talk about the missing out on life. Like, I was literally not going to go on my 10-year anniversary and take a beach trip with my husband because what was someone going to say? Like,
yeah.
screw that. Like, we're now going back this June. You know, me and my husband, we're taking the kids. My parents are going. One of my siblings is going. Like, think of the things that I would have been missing out on.
Right. Or you would have
Um,
said yes, but not fully
and
been
been
there.
miserable and
Yeah.
not fully been there and been nervous. And like, it's so funny. So like my husband, so right, he's from DR. Like he basically comes out of the womb dancing is what it feels like in his country, or at least in
Uh,
his family. But like we dance. That's how we met. We met dancing and we dance like and we go. And so like at the resort in the evenings, if you've been to these resorts, like they have tons of live music and we're dancing and I'm my dress and it's flowing and it's dancing. And again, I felt great and like it was so funny because this happens. Like we get a ton of props whenever we
yeah.
go out
Didn't
and go
someone come
dancing
up to
because
you and say something?
yeah,
Yeah, I remember
someone
this.
did. Someone came up to me and was like, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing." Blah blah blah. And so
Oh.
it's so funny because again like older me, stuck in diet culture me, smaller bodied me would have been like, oh my gosh, like look at, I would have been judging or whatever. And it's like now it's again just so different.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's just
Oh,
really
I
different
have
and
chills,
it's
Amy, all over
fun.
my body. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I know so much of this from being alongside you on this journey, but hearing it all back and I'm so struck by how you went from, and this comes from the book More Than a Body, that this
Mhm.
concept, you went from
Which
self-objectifying.
I finished reading on the plane to DR, by the way.
Okay, yes.
Continue.
So the concept, another just like divine timing thing, the concept in More Than a Body that I'm really thinking about is how you went from self-objectifying to like like seeing yourself as like in what you're doing and thinking, how do I look at all times? So like your
Yeah.
consciousness is always split of I'm doing the thing and I'm also outside of myself, looking at myself, doing the thing, checking how do I look? How do other people think I look?
Yeah.
And you cannot be fully present when you're self-objectifying because your consciousness is split into being both like the doer and the seer, the person looking at yourself.
Yeah.
And when I hear you talk about the DR and so many other of these stories, I hear so much embodiment of
Mhm.
being there fully and removing, I mean, not that it's never there, but kind of like limiting or reducing the part of your consciousness that's concerned with what are other people
Yeah.
thinking I look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's cool. Like, when you reached out a few weeks ago saying, that there might be folks who might be interested in like an ongoing support if you've gone through the thing, have some community. And I'm like, well, it would be cool to be in community with folks, just because, but I'm like, I truly don't like, it's like the toothpaste is out of the bottle for me now. Like, and when there is a bad day, again, like I feel much because I think I do a lot of therapy work, because I do a lot of journaling, like I feel much more equipped to use my tools
Yeah.
to move through those moments, to have grace in those moments, to recognize, all right, I need to take a nap. I need to do this.
Yes.
I'm so much more aware of what I need. Um, and it's just totally different. And one thing that I feel, I don't know if this is a good thing to share. Or, it's not in anything. There's not a good or bad thing, but there was something that I'm feeling really called to share. And not the disclaimer I'm going to give is this doesn't make things better or worse. It's not right or wrong. It's just again because I talked so much about my fear in the beginning of what was going to happen.
Yes.
Truly, it is amazing to be in this space of like again going on these vacations and doing the things I'm doing and truly like looking at my body as like this gift of creation that it is. And my weight is probably the most stable it's ever been. I'm not saying that there's not moments, especially like I'm coming up on my annual physical and I'm just like, oh, here we go.
Hmm.
So I gotta like prepare for that a little bit mentally because inevitably my provider is gonna make a comment about weight. Um, it's not like there's no like I wish I could go back. There's times where when I'm having a really bad body image day, I'll say, "Man, I wish I could go back in time to when I was the smaller me and know what I know now." Because I would have never like my size wouldn't have changed the way it has. And yet also I wouldn't be here without every step of the journey. So but it's interesting because for me being so afraid of what was going to happen, like so much of this is an inside job for me. And I've redefined health. So health is so much more to me than a blood lab. Yet I feel healthier than ever, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. Like I am taking better care of myself, not from the sense of like I'm eating the right foods, but like from a place of nourishment, from a place of care, from a place of
Mm.
compassion, of how I want to feel and navigate life in a given day. My weight is as stable as it's ever been. There is none of this financially. We're better because I'm not buying 12 different sets of clothes every other day.
Mhm.
Was my size goes up and down and up and down and up and down.
And
Like
like diety gimmicky things of like this will be the
diet
one thing
gimmick
that
thing.
will, yeah,
Yes. Like this shake routine, that
exactly. Yeah.
workout video subscription,
Yes.
like all that crap. Like my labs, my A1C has stayed down. My labs are all fine. Like I actually have again, knock on wood, like this is one of the healthiest stretches of time that I've had,
Mm.
both looking at the old, just blood lab fixated metrics and looking at my new, more expansive, more aligned definition of what health looks like. And that's, I think, one of the coolest, best parts
Yeah.
for me.
Yes. You've highlighted so beautifully the ripple effects. Like it's so much more than just food. It starts with food. It ripples everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, there's one last thing I want to touch on, and then we have to wrap up. Just looking at time. So for the person who's like, oh my God, well, I'll just eat all the things if I allow cookies, candy, ice cream, cake, whatever. That's all I'll ever eat. And the person who really fears that kind of like if I give myself food freedom, I'll feel out of control and I'll only go for like the play food slash like what they might be calling at that point in their journey, junk food. What what has your experience been with that?
Um, so Leah's habituation experiment works. Um, Eventually it just kind of loses its, I don't know, power over you.
What ice cream was your flavor? Was it fish food?
Tonight dough from Ben
Tonight
and
dough. Oh
Jerry's.
yes, that's my favorite too.
So I could not have a pint in the house without pounding it immediately and eating the whole thing. And not that there's anything wrong with eating the whole thing if you want a whole thing of ice cream, except that normally it made me feel sick after eating the whole thing of ice cream. And so you sent me, I don't even remember how many pints of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And
Like
I had already
5.
bought, so I had like, you had sent me five. I had bought like three or four. I had like 10 pints of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And yeah, eventually it was just like, okay. I don't think I want more ice. Like you just kind of, I just kind of got over it. And it's actually funny. I remember I remember when I had a doc who put me on Whole30, which is all like veggies and fruits and all the things. And it was like painful, like feeling like I had to eat all the fruits and veggies. I eat more salads now than I ever would have thought possible. And it's not like, oh, I need to eat a salad to be good, but it's like, oh, I could really go for a nice crunchy salad. Like I've noticed because again, you focus on finding the satisfaction in the meals and different things. Like I find that I'll crave salad and I'll really be in the mood for a particular salad with a particular type of nuts that I put on it. And I'm eating them constantly. I drink more milk because I started to really notice like I would always crave a
That.
sweet thing
Yeah.
after food, but it was truly I wasn't getting enough fat in a lot of my meals. And so I'll find myself being like, do I really want that sweet thing or do I just need a little bit of fat? And I'll take a glass of milk. And sometimes I still end up getting the cookie or the whatever anyways because I feel like eating it and okay. But it's also nice to like I can almost always recognize when I haven't had enough fat in my meal. And it's cool to be able to see that and to know that. And to say, okay, I'm gonna go have some milk. Or today I really feel like that piece of birthday cake. So I'm gonna eat the birthday cake
Yes.
or whatever it is. But it I don't know. It's not that there's never, ever, ever a moment that I've eaten past comfortable fullness. But when it does happen, it's kind of few and far between. I almost always know why. And usually it was because I had a really extra active day and or whatever, like or something. Like my schedule was such that I was incapable of eating for a while. And so
Right.
of course I was trying to get more in. Um, and it's just like, okay, moving on, learning from that. Next time I'll bring a snack in the car. Or
Yes.
next time I'll try to plan ahead and maybe I'll bring a smoothie or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, all right, got it, moving on. And I'm much kinder to myself about it. It doesn't send me off into this like disaster zone, catastrophe. You're gonna have a heart attack tomorrow, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. My cheeks hurt from smiling, Amy. It's so beautiful to just hear you reflect on your story. And I'm so grateful for you to really sharing all these pieces of your
Yeah,
story. And I
sure.
agree. I think the timing has been beautiful. I think it's nice to have some space. It's not like because the program is 4 months. A lot can happen in 4 months, and a lot more happens when you sit with the tools and you
Yeah.
let life happen. And there's more kind of
Yeah.
like opportunities to apply the tools, like trips
Yeah.
to the DR and different things,
Yeah.
family weddings, all the things. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else you're feeling called to add that we missed?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Other than like it's just been really cool. I can remember being so confused and like feeling like I didn't, as it related to food in my body, like what was left from right, up from down, what was good for me, bad for me, like I just felt so disconnected from like knowing for myself and like always needing to rely on someone else's input. And there is definitely a very real confidence in this is what I need right now. This is what I want. This is what I'm in the mood for. I'm not in the mood for that. And it goes so much beyond just food. Like
Mm.
there's and that's been really cool.
Yeah. It's when I was hearing you describe the piece about like, oh, actually I'm wanting fat right now. Like for the person listening to this who's like, geez, like I didn't even know you could be that in touch. You can. That wasn't Amy in week 1 and week 2 and month 1, but that's like a place you can get to as you kind of fine tune your intuition more and more. It starts with like, oh, what a different nuanced feelings of hunger and fullness sound like. Then down the road, you might get to the point of like, oh, actually, I can pinpoint I'm craving more fat or a combination of carb and protein. And then like even beyond that, it turns into, ooh, like this is the thing that I need right now. Like I need to like rest, or I need to call a
Yeah.
friend, or I'm craving a
Mhm.
walk. Like it
Yeah.
just you can kind of like keep turning that dial and dial in even
Totally.
closer. Um,
I would have
and
never in a million years thought that like I would know like the feeling in my belly when there wasn't enough fat in my
so
dinner.
freaking
Like
cool. I love that.
never. Like it just seemed like so foreign and like not possible to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amy, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
my
know your
pleasure.
story will inspire so many people, especially for the person who has so many of the same hesitations you had in the beginning. Um, Thank you. I'm so
Yeah,
grateful,
my
and
pleasure.
it's been
Thank
such an honor
you.
too. Yeah,
Thank you. I'm so grateful for your support and just everything. I can't, I still can't believe this journey, and I'm so grateful for you.
it's been such a pleasure, Amy.
Mhm.